I presume you're here in order to learn of Magecraft. I'll have you know, there's no room for the weak-willed in this course, and despite your best efforts, the sorcery of our time is but a fraction of what it once was in the Age of Gods. Much of the craft is established through pedigree, and the culture of mages is riddled with deception and moral depravity. That said, if you insist, I shall do my best to educate you in this miserable, yet fascinating world. In our previous lesson, I spoke of Ort, the ultimate one from the Oort cloud that remains dormant in South America. Such a destructive being targets humanity as a matter of instinct and isn't driven by malice. In that regard, it can be difficult to call Ort evil, as it lacks an understanding of empathy and morality. Of course, this is not to pacify the threat and tragedy that Ort brings. I simply want to point out that there are agents in this world who do understand the weight of their actions and continue on without remorse. Many mages do exactly this, deliberately ignoring or mocking the pain and suffering their craft brings about. Sometimes, these mages believe in a higher calling, which they use to justify their wicked behavior. Others are hurt, desperately searching for meaning in the universe. Worst of all are mages who bask in bloodshed, taking pleasure in their self-acknowledged sins. This is true for humans in general, but Magecraft provides people a unique opportunity to indulge in what most people consider evil. Certainly, outsiders are more apt to criticize, but even one such as I, who delves into the craft, cannot turn a blind eye to the deeds of malevolent mages. Thus, for today's lesson, I shall chronicle a handful of controversial cases as a cautionary tale. There is no better place to start than France following the burning of Jeanne d'Arc. Black magic and witchcraft don't have to be evil, but in the hands of Francois Prelati, it absolutely is. Born the child of a Greek goddess, Prelati wasn't a normal human, but that doesn't excuse his insatiable thirst for gore. He trained under various mages, one of whom being Merlin's disciple. Rather than conjure a field of flowers, however, Prelati would rather horrify others with a field of severed toddler hands, among other nightmarish sights. He specializes in summoning demons and other mysterious, horrifying creatures. This is handled through Prelati's spellbook, a text originating from Cthulhu's sunken spiral castle. Written in Rillier tongue, it has since been translated into Chinese and later Italian. Prelati's translation is bound in human skin, containing spells that predate humanity itself. With this grimoire in hand, he committed unspeakable atrocities until finally being executed. Still yearning for the misery of his victims, he would then continue to reincarnate and currently takes the form of a young girl, Francesca. Even now, she works to make the world a more interesting place, according to her twisted tastes. The Holy Grail War, filled with bloodshed, is her primary focus. She treats dead apostles as competition, as she thrives off human suffering. She is very much a monster on their level, if not far worse. On that note, we should mention the exploits of one Michael Roa Valdemjong. He was a mage who yearned for eternity and would do literally anything to obtain it. This meant turning himself into a dead apostle ancestor, a process that sadly didn't affect him alone. After all, dead apostles can only live eternally so long as they continue to drink human blood. Simply from that, Roa chose to preserve himself at the expense of others. To survive and gain power, Roa slaughtered entire towns for satiation, entertainment, and recruiting lesser vampires. Perhaps even more vile, he would reincarnate whenever killed, taking innocent children as his new vessels. These unfortunate victims would find themselves merging with Roa's consciousness, developing a taste for murder against their will. It's one thing to commit your own evils, and another to force people to commit them on your behalf. Just how many must meet a premature end so that one man can prolong his inevitable demise? Only a selfish mage could accept the trade-off. Let us return to Francois Prelati for a moment. His dearest friend in life became Gilles de Rais, a once loyal knight fighting for Joan of Arc. Like his idol, Gilles was a man of God, following Jeanne's crusade with a righteous passion. However, when the church executed her in flames, Gilles' faith shattered. How could someone so devout to the Lord be treated so cruelly? How could a just and loving God allow for such sin? Desperate to prove God's existence, Gilles began to commit atrocities, hoping for divine retribution. Despite not being a mage, Gilles sinned plenty on his own, molesting and tormenting kidnapped children. That said, he would bolster his carnage by relying on Prelati's black arts. Before long, he developed a liking for others' misery, declaring that pain is at its peak just as hope is torn asunder. In Fuyuki's Fourth Grail War, he would impart this lesson onto his master Ryunosuke, who shared his sadism. Disillusioned about the presence of God, Gilles enabled Ryunosuke's sick attempts to make art with corpses. By keeping his victims alive through Magecraft, he could expand his creative approach to torture. Captive children were turned into installation pieces, such as a flesh umbrella or screaming pipe organ. Eventually, Ryunosuke enlightened Gilles by suggesting God does not punish them because he loves both happiness and despair. Under this philosophy, their merciless killing could be seen as a form of worship and religious celebration. Thankfully, in the end, they not only violated the concealment of mystery, but more humane mages like Kirei Emiya stepped in to finish them. Kiritsugu's moral compass was forged through the destruction of his former home. His father, Noritaka, was willing to expose an innocent village to his dangerous research for the chance to reach the root. He had no intention of actively hurting anyone, yet also felt no grief when his Magecraft accidentally turned the villagers into vampiric monsters. He failed to inform his apprentice Shirley what could happen to her, and instead tried to simply flee and resume his work elsewhere. Noritaka's lack of remorse and disregard for safety make his pursuit of the root an evil one. Some mages believe that reaching the root is worth any sacrifice, that the ends justify the means. Souren Araya is one such mage. After living for over 300 years, he witnessed enough death that he wanted to give people's deaths meaning. By reaching Akasha, he would experience the origin of all souls and dedicate them to memory as a form of validation. To that end, he believed adding more casualties wouldn't change things in the long run. He would waken other people to their origins, failing to consider their well-being as a result. Everyone he enlightened this way fell into tragic situations. Araya's workshop, the Ogawa apartment complex, was a facility designed to push its tenants to madness. Innocent residents would be pushed to the brink of insanity, killing each other in agony. Then, as if to mock those deaths, Araya would have dolls reenact them in perpetuity, creating an accelerated cycle of death and rebirth that could access the root. I suppose the morality of his actions are a matter of personal philosophy. Still, even if you could interpret Araya's goal as a worthy one, the fact that he imposed his view on others did nothing to appease his victims. At least he thought he was helping people. The mage Atram Galiasta is far less gracious. He came from a wealthy lineage, basking in the company of beautiful courtesans, yet that wasn't enough for him. Atram sought the Grail for even greater prestige, arrogantly assuming his craft would be adequate. He abused his caster servant, and in order to accomplish even a fraction of what a mage from the Age of Gods could do using their ode alone, Atram sacrificed the lives of captive children. His workshop was both tasteless and inefficient. In the right company, he might have come off as a halfway decent person, but his true colors were nothing but vile. Ideally, a mage should get to choose whether to embrace the craft. This rarely happens, however, as mage families are desperate to pass on their legacy, depriving their children of freedom. Long ago, the mage Zoken Mato sought the Grail to benefit humanity. Generations of swapping bodies, however, have caused that noble goal to fade into obscurity. The one who falls victim to this the most is Sakura Mato. Against her will, she was raised to become the family's next heir, which meant enduring the Mato's crestworms as a child. Initially, she was terrified, screaming for help as the worms swarmed her naked body. Eventually, she was violated so harshly she grew numb to it, internalizing the trauma. As if that weren't cruel enough, Zoken opted to install into her body leftover fragments of the previous grail, grooming her into a backup vessel. Again, if a mage is willing to sacrifice their own well-being, then so be it. Instead, Sakura was a victim to Zoken's lost ambition. Sharing some of the blame is her father, Tokiomi Tosaka, who must have known how Mato mages were trained. Even if he thought the crestworms were well worth the suffering to become a talented mage, he imposed that value onto Sakura without her consent. Sadly, this is all too normal for mage families. Another common evil is the abuse and mistreatment of familiars. Both the Yggdmillennia clan and the Einsburns think little of killing their homunculi. For the Einsburns, most of their creations are scrapped as failures, unable to reach the same quality as Justice. Sickeningly, their mansion has a room dedicated to discarded bodies. Darnik Prestone Yggdmillennia was willing to work with the Nazi party to obtain the Greater Grail. Even though he was only using them for his own gain, I see it as validating behavior. For the Great Grail War in Trifus, he and his fellow mage faction used homunculi as infantry. Even worse, most of their homunculi were set up as batteries to power servants. Imagine being born, capable of love and fear, only to be sealed away as a power source. Either your entire body is consumed outright, or you're tossed into a pile of your expired kin. Among the Yggdmillennia mages, Celenike Icecol deserves special mention. She hailed from a lineage of mages practicing the dark arts. After fleeing from witch hunts during the Middle Ages, Celenike eventually rose as the family's new promising star. She was used to performing horrible curses, many of which involved removing the innards of sacrifices, both beast and human. For added effect, she would push her victims to the edge of pain and suffering before finally ending them. She reeked of death, to the point where she tried to hide her scent behind strong perfumes to no avail. It's no surprise, then, that she delighted in torturing the clan's homunculi, welcoming her cruel magecraft as a source of pleasure. During the war, she treated her own servant Astolfo as a plaything, an object to lust for. When he refused her commands, she punished him until losing her head to Mordred's blade. On the same wavelength is Beryl Gut, a mage who joined the clock tower while being a serial killer. He learned from his witch of a mother spells geared toward assassination and torture. When she could no longer teach him anything new, Beryl killed her and went on to find other victims. For the most part, his murders were overlooked so long as he was useful. To that end, he was recruited into Chaldea's Team A in order to observe and eliminate potential deserters. Oddly enough, Beryl claimed to love Mashu Kyrielite, yet his way of showing it was corrupt beyond recognition. He believed he could only see her true beauty by defiling her, and took to breaking her fingers as a sick display of affection. As a crypter, he betrayed his duty to instead pursue violence. When Kirstario Vodim nearly transcended humanity to godhood, Beryl stabbed him, imagining that such a future would be boring. Beryl deserves to be held responsible for his actions, but we can also shame Marisbury Animsphere for employing him. While Chaldea's leader claimed to be fighting to protect the human order, it's clear his methods pushed the moral envelope. One need only look toward the massacres within the Seraphix oil rig, and the many failed designer babies discarded there. One thing to consider is whether evil is the product of nature or nurture. One can certainly argue that mage culture cultivates cruelty. However, there are certain individuals who appear to be born evil. Such is the case for Kirei Kotomine, a man who lived much of his life in shame, torn between his duty as a priest and his sinister instincts. Initially refusing to believe it, Kirei tried to overcome his sadistic tastes. He even married a sickly woman to invoke a sense of love and sympathy. Hauntingly, such an endeavor only made him sad he never got the chance to murder his own wife. Kirei started Fuyuki's Fourth Grail War with no motive of his own, but by the end chose to step up as a competitor. In this endeavor, he stabbed his own pupil in the back and mercilessly killed his rivals. The techniques he learned as a man of the cloth were repurposed to inflict pain on the competition. When the Grail's corrupt mud finally responded to his inner desire, it manifested in a destructive fire that torched Fuyuki's city sector. Choosing to accept his inner depravity, Kirei sought to encounter the Grail once more for the chance to awaken Angra Mainyu, all the world's evils. To accomplish this, he used being a preacher as a front for amassing orphaned children, whom he would exploit to sustain his new servant Gilgamesh for over a decade. He kept these children alive, barely, long enough to siphon their magical energy. Despite this, his role as an antagonist relies entirely on context. Under the right conditions, he can be an ally, though I suppose this only applies when sharing a common foe. In summation, Magecraft itself is less evil than those who use it. A wicked mind will harness spells to murder and torment. At the same time, mage culture often contributes to molding a naive heir into an unsympathetic monster. It's a shame, since this doesn't have to be the case. There are, in fact, ways to harness Magecraft for a benevolent cause, no matter how uncommon. As such, for our next lesson, I plan to cover these more optimistic practices, as well as potential applications which have yet to be implemented. Thanks for watching. This channel relies on support from viewers like you.
Please help us out by dropping a like and comment. Subscribe for more videos, and be sure to enable notifications. Or hit up our Discord so you never miss out on a new upload.
Most importantly, if you can spare it, please sign up as a channel member, either through YouTube, Patreon, or Subscribestar. You can find links in the description. We've got perks like exclusive content or early access.
Until next time,
Celebrate your fandom. I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Otaku Mom, Mystic Samurai 1983, Free Brick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Lunar Works, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Crow Calum, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Major, Winter's Edge, Sneer Cachette, Sunbro Torian, Dionysus, Caitlin P, Sogai CH, Sith Lord 906, Vladimir Ovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X77, and Alistair Bernadotte. Thank you all so much.